this is beyond just kind of social audio, but just social in general. A lot of these environments aren't brand safe. And LinkedIn has always been one of the most brand safe networks because it comes with this environment of professionalism with it.
Hey gang, it's Monday, May 3rd. Gillian and listeners, welcome to the Behind the Numbers Daily, a new marketer podcast made possible by VTEX. I'm Marcus, and today I'm joined by our principal analyst who covers everything B2B. It's Gillian Ryan.
It's gonna be May. I'm sorry, I had to.
Why, what's that?
Marcus! Oh my God, wait.
I'm like the least in tune with pop. Well, if it's a pop culture reference.
It is a pop culture reference. It is like NSYNC's best song. And it's like a meme that goes viral every April as it turns to May. And it's Justin Timberlake saying, it's gonna be May.
It's gonna be May.
But it's supposed to be like, it's gonna be me. All of our listeners right now are so upset at you.
Oh.
All of our listeners.
What song? What's the song? I probably know the song. I just don't know that lyric.
But like when he says it, it sounds like he says May.
It's gonna be May.
Am I going to get fired?
Yes.
I don't want to get fired.
I have fired you.
Oh man, that's what we got time for today's episode. I'm going to pack up my things. I'm so sorry. I feel like I know the song. I just don't know the song.
I'm going to send you these memes when we get off the podcast.
Okay. Hang on. I'm YouTubing it right now. I need to know what it is.
It's gonna be May memes. And it's like, what is it? Like roses are red, violets are blue.
All right. Here we go.
Something. It's gonna be May. I don't remember.
There's an ad first. Hang on. I know bye. Is it just two
All
buys?
I was trying to do was be relevant to when this episode was airing, and I've totally derailed us.
No. This is where we should be. Oh yeah, okay.
He has no clue.
I haven't got a clue, no.
I also love that Victoria was like, yes! And Marcus was like, it was like complete crickets on my entry point.
Yeah, I
don't want to hear it.
I may not know this one.
I was like, don't say anything bad about it.
My face was the face of someone rewatching a 90s boy band video.
Early 2000s.
Just horrified.
Get it correct.
Oh, was it early 2000s?
Early 2000s.
It wasn't 90s. This looks very... Okay. I got nothing. Sorry, folks.
Do we want to redo that intro?
No, we should just keep going.
Keep going. I'm sure the audience is still with us to talk about LinkedIn.
They might be with us. Maybe they've walked away because I can't be around this kind of a host. There's nothing. I can't trust him on
Backstreet Boy fans.
I can't trust him on digital media anymore. There's nothing of pop culture. I'm sorry, folks. Whew. That could be today's fact. Let's just move on. That's the intro. No facts today. That's the fact today. I don't know my NSYNC references. Today's real topic is LinkedIn. Gillian, let's start. We're talking about LinkedIn today. Lots of stuff to talk about with LinkedIn. It's been a while since we last talked about them. Let's start with the relatively recent news that LinkedIn is looking to further support its community of content creators. Our eMarketer Briefing newsletter was noting that lots of social platforms are investing in their creators, from Twitter's review acquisition, the forthcoming newsletter initiative, to Snapchat's Spotlight feature and TikTok's Creator Fund. At the end of March, LinkedIn announced a new Creator Mode feature aimed at making it easier for influencers to communicate with their audiences. Users can now follow creator profiles to see new content and updates rather than needing to connect with that person, which is more of a two-way street. So yeah, it's creators, Gillian. We're living in the business world here, the professional business world. How do you think companies, or how are companies thinking about B2B influencer marketing and this creator program? Yeah.
Well, first, I'm going to plug Jasmine Enberg's forthcoming report on the creator economy, which I just had the pleasure to review. It's coming out in a few weeks.
We'll have an episode on that shortly.
She has so much insight to share, and I might be stealing some of the gems from her report. But, she talks about, basically why social media platforms are starting to cater to creators. And creators and influencers are a term you could used interchangeably. Jasmine has very strong and stringent definitions for both.
Yep.
But, LinkedIn going in this direction is just following suit with those other platforms. And the other platforms are doing it because they realize that these creators are the users on their platform that are creating the most engaging content. They have the most users interacting with them, and they're driving so much of the engagement and the lifeblood of what's happening on these platforms. And if you're looking for stickiness, if you're looking to ensure that users are still spending time there, investing in creators is a great way to support the growth of your platform over time. So LinkedIn going in this direction, is definitely taking something out of the page of all those other examples that you had just listed. But there are some distinctions here because LinkedIn is a network for professionals. And in most cases, that means that it is, B2B, but it's also just, a different type of audience. And something that Jasmine noted in her report is that the creator economy in general is becoming professionalized, which I thought was really interesting because here on LinkedIn, the creator economy and, creator communities would be amongst all professionals in their own right on the platform. So I think this is just, another step in the development of this trend. And for B2Bs, it does take on, a little bit of its own life because this is thought leadership. This is executive influence. Right. This is employee advocacy. And those are all things like I'm happy to dive into, Marcus. Like, tell me where you want to go. I'll stop rambling.
Well, my first question / thought is, do you think that influencers on LinkedIn, these creators, they're going to be folks who are freelancers, people who work for themselves and have more freedom to put out the type of content that they want? Or do you think it's going to be folks at certain companies? Like Jeff Ramsey, who's co-founder of eMarketer, bit of a rock star at our company and was out there in the world and you can argue is one of the kind of influencers out there at the moment, but is within the company of eMarketer. How do you see, or what kind of an influencer or creator do you see emerging on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think it's such a fair question. And I would totally agree that within, the realms of professionalism, Jeff is an influencer for sure. Yeah. But even, ourselves as analysts, I don't want to say that I am an influencer because that sounds incredibly, self-aggrandizing and like I have a big ego, but I am out there, this podcast is going to publish and I'm going to share it on LinkedIn. I'm going to promote it with some sort of quote, probably not about InSync, about LinkedIn, and put it out there. Anytime a report publishes, I do the same. Last week I was speaking at an event about B2B branding. Like I'm out there always sharing my thought leadership because I'm building my profile. And to answer your question directly, it's like, so is that, self-promotion? Is it corporate promotion? And I think it depends on the individual. I mean, I'm doing it for both reasons. I'm doing it to grow the Insider Intelligence brand, the marketer brand. That's how I connect with interview sources for my reports. It's how I get leads on new research. It's how I get invited to speak at these events. It's how I get invitations to go be a guest on other podcasts. Sorry, Marcus. So it's all part of, putting yourself out there in the community. And it's also realizing that when you're talking about a B2B influencer, in most cases, that's all about promoting content on social media. Like that's what you think about when you think about like a typical influencer or a creator using like Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat, whatever. But on LinkedIn, it's a lot more than that because professional influencers and thought leaders are also doing a lot of public speaking. They're doing a lot of media appearances. They're going on podcasts. They're organizing events, now virtual events. Perhaps in-person events. We'll talk about that later. So it's the role of an influencer is a lot bigger and it happens on and off platform. And I think here LinkedIn is really trying to capture the fact that they are a platform that can provide a place for these influencers to come and share their content. So LinkedIn's just trying to capitalize on, the creator economy trend that's happening on one side and then B2B thought leadership, which has been happening for years. It's not a new trend by any means.
Yeah. They announced their creator management team last month. So the whole team focused on this. eMarketer analyst Nina Getson was noting the creator mode profiles can also function like business profiles, letting users attach service pages to their profiles. It's likely a move to support its upcoming freelancer network marketplaces. Think Fiverr or Upwork, which the information reported was in development last month.
Yeah.
We could talk about this for the whole bloody episode.
No, I mean, I think it's about the gig economy too. And then I'll be quiet. I know you want to move on.
No, go ahead. Yeah, please.
No, I was just saying, and it is, so yeah, there are going to be influencers that work at their company. They're trying to build their own brand. Then you also have employee advocacy programs, which are basically formal influencer programs where the marketing department says, this is what's important to our company this week, and has all of the employees go out there and put it on LinkedIn. So that's happening. But then for the individuals that perhaps, don't have a formal job and they are out there on their own, this is a way to market their services or market their own business that they're growing. So it could be used across a bunch of different professional use cases.
Yeah. Well, as Gillian was saying, Jasmine Emberg, one of our analysts covering global trends, she just was working on, has put out.
She just submitted her first draft, which was excellent. Okay. So it should be publishing in like another week or two. I don't know the exact date though.
Okay, Creator Economy report. Look out for it if you're a pro subscriber. We'll definitely do an episode on it, and Gillian will have you back, hopefully, with Jasmine to talk about that topic. We've got to move on now to some other things LinkedIn's been up to, or reportedly up to. Actually, I guess no, they confirmed this with TechCrunch, so they are working on it. A Clubhouse competitor. LinkedIn apparently working on their own social audio feature to try and compete with Clubhouse. Little details at this point, Gillian. Some screenshots. Don't know if they're concepts or whether they will actually come to market. Mm-hmm. It looks very similar to Clubhouse. It looks like the little images with your face in them. Below them, there might be your name, but also your job title, the company you work for, maybe some other information as well. Your thoughts on what kind of noise LinkedIn can make in the social audio space?
Yeah, I mean, I've said this on the podcast before, but I'll say it again. I don't have access to Clubhouse. There's such a huge part of the market that currently cannot go in and experience it. So I've been invited to go participate in Clubhouse events and had to decline as an analyst, even though, I want to share kind of in this similar capacity, like my voice with an audience about a certain topic.
Yeah.
But on LinkedIn, there's such an opportunity because there's already all of these professional users that have a community, that have an audience that they've cultivated. They have all of these connections. Some of them are developing followings, and they're already on the platform. So this is just another feature that they could use to share their thought leadership, to share their point of view. So you think about how LinkedIn just introduced stories to the platform. Like, this is just another feature that LinkedIn is putting out there to diversify the type of content and the type of thought leadership that can be produced and shared on the platform. So it's similar to like LinkedIn Live being new. Now, I don't know what they're calling it. Are they calling it like audio? Do you know what they're calling it?
Oh, the LinkedIn, the service, the social audio service?
Yeah.
No name at the minute. Yeah, just LinkedIn social audio service.
Well, whenever they come up with a cool name for it, it'll just be another add-on to the menu of things that, a user can do on the platform.
So you think that given that Clubhouse is being used for professional events, if you will, mini conferences, do you think it's going to not be too difficult to pull that audience away from Clubhouse?
I don't necessarily know if it will pull it away, but I do think that it will be able to compete with Clubhouse. Because you think about, LinkedIn they have LinkedIn Live, people are broadcasting on the platform already. And then we've talked at length too, Marcus, about just like the general Zoom fatigue that people have. And I, for one, would just love to be able to, open up my LinkedIn app and listen to what experts in my industry are saying about the topics that I care about and have it already connected to me, already showing up in my feed because I'm already connected to those people. And, I know there are users that have done that on Clubhouse already, but LinkedIn has the advantage just because of the huge network of users that they have.
Yeah, huge network of users, but also they're people who you want to make sure you're on your best behavior around because they're work colleagues and they're people in the industry. Whereas Clubhouse, it's a bit of a free-for-all. And so that was one of the potential benefits of LinkedIn creating some kind of social audio service, was that because you have to sync it with your LinkedIn profile, it could be a major deterrent for the kinds of harassment and abuse reported on Clubhouse, because now you're a real person and there are real consequences.
Yeah.
Especially if I can see what company you work for.
Yeah. And it's such a great point too, and this is beyond just kind of social audio, but just social in general. A lot of these environments aren't brand safe. And LinkedIn has always been one of the most brand safe networks because it comes with this environment of professionalism with it. And, we publish at Insider Intelligence a digital trust report every year that one of our analysts works on. And LinkedIn ranks highest year over year in terms of trust. And that is because everybody does, to a certain extent, feel like they need to be on their best behavior. But we're also seeing LinkedIn users be human. Just because you're a professional doesn't mean that you can't be yourself. You could still show up and have a unique tone of voice. You could still be approachable. You don't have to be this like stiff person in a suit who's going on there using social audio. Like you could still, kind of the way I just sang in sync at the top of this podcast,
Right.
you could balance, you as a person and you as the professional into one package.
Yeah, there is. Nina Getson, one of our analysts, was questioning how much being on LinkedIn will come at the expense of the post-work drinks, because Clubhouse has a bit more of a relaxed feeling. Is LinkedIn able to capture that, or is it going to be a bit stiffer?
I mean, it'll definitely be a little bit stiffer for sure, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be like so formal and buttoned up. Like I've seen some LinkedIn lives that, are tongue in cheek, that have a little bit of humor. And especially, I know this is going to go off topic, so I'll stop after this, but we've also talked about, millennial decision makers having more of a seat at a table. So B2Bs in general are kind of loosening up their tone, trying to speak to different cohorts. And it isn't just like sweating in a suit, trying to make sure your tie is squeezing your neck. Like those days of professionalism, that isn't the standard anymore, even though that still does exist.
I wear the same very casual outfit every day. Luckily, no one has to see what I look like. Structured professional events, definitely in LinkedIn's wheelhouse. And as you mentioned, LinkedIn Live and the events feature. In 2020, around 21 million people attended an event on LinkedIn. And overall, LinkedIn sessions up 30% year on year. That was Sarah Perez of TechCrunch talking about that. I do think it could be quite powerful. I think, that you can offer a fuller profile of who's in the room. If you can click on them, if you can add them to your network, if you can message them as well, all features that Clubhouse doesn't have. In terms of messaging people and already that pre-existing network of people as well. Mm-hmm. LinkedIn said over 60% of its members were working remotely by the end of 2020, up from 8% before the pandemic. So there are a lot of people still remote who do want to connect with people who don't want video, as Gillian was saying. So there's definitely an audience there. Gillian, finally on LinkedIn, let's talk about their performance overall as a company, users, revenue, things like that. By the latest available count, it seems like LinkedIn is saying over 700 million users worldwide. That's the last figure that I could find, at least. LinkedIn credits a lot of its high levels of engagement to its new messaging experience, stories, its search functionality, and also a lot of engagement coming because folks were looking for jobs last year. Microsoft was saying, who owns LinkedIn, around 40 million job seekers used LinkedIn a few quarters ago. Microsoft says advertiser demand on LinkedIn is already at close to or pre-COVID levels. LinkedIn's ad business reached $3 billion in revenue over the last 12 months, says Microsoft. Gillian, what stands out to you about LinkedIn's overall performance of late?
Yeah, so we just had their earnings announcement come out last week, and I spent some time reviewing it, which is, part of my job, and also just in preparation for this conversation with you, Marcus. And I think you pulled out a lot of the highlights. Revenue increased 25%, and they are saying, yes, it's predicted to grow, especially as the job market rebounds. So they'll be bringing in those kind of talent solution dollars, which is really when companies are hiring and they're using ads on LinkedIn to get those roles in front of potential candidates. Microsoft also says conversions on the platform increased by 43% last quarter. The amount of content shared increased by 29%. And then it also highlights LinkedIn Learning, its educational program, which increased by 80%, which makes a lot of sense as there have been, so many folks, unfortunately, that have been laid off or are working part-time and they're looking to brush up on their professional skills. So because of all the different solutions that LinkedIn offers, it really is primed to take in so many angles of the professional market. I did want to focus, Marcus, you had alluded to that $3 billion threshold that LinkedIn just crossed. So in their statement earnings, they're saying that LinkedIn marketing solutions, so that's the side of the business that is, it's ad business. It's the interface that advertisers can use to advertise on LinkedIn, right? So their revenue grew more than 60%, and they're saying that it's growing nearly 3 times faster than the B2B digital advertising market on a whole. So I have a couple of points there. Mm-hmm. The first one, and this is personally something that I'm really proud of and excited about. So that 3 times faster figure is, I am most certainly in reference to our US B2b Digital Ad Forecast that eMarketer puts out every year. So when we put that out last summer, we said that the US B2b digital ad market was growing by 22.6%. So if LinkedIn's saying that revenue is up 60% and they're growing 3 times faster, they're most certainly referencing our growth numbers, which is exciting just to see, as an analyst, our number being used in reference,
Absolutely.
in such a high level earnings call. Interestingly, though, according to our estimates, we did have LinkedIn growing 31% year over year. So we knew that they would outpace the larger ad market in our earnings. Myself and Peter Valley are about to start getting deep into this forecast again. So we'll have some updates on how these earnings compare to our larger predictions for the ad market.
Yep.
Something else that I took some time this morning to talk to Eric Hagstrom about, who's on our forecasting team as well, just to kind of make sure that I was putting this into context with the larger ad market and considering all the other growth that, Google had 30% year over year with search, YouTube 49% year over year, Facebook 45%, Snap 66%. LinkedIn is really in line with those growth rates. And it's interesting, and this is the last point, is that this sounds like, wow, the ad market is thriving. And it is. It's Q1. We're looking back at kind of what happened after a huge decline that we saw last year. So this is us really seeing the recovery come into place. But as we go, later into the year and start looking at earnings, we're definitely going to see some of these kind of year over year percentages deflate a little bit, just because we did see some of this recovery starting in H2 of 2020. So it'll be interesting to see how LinkedIn does perform, as we start getting later in the year. I don't think it'll be at that 60% number, but yes, it will certainly, be growing.
We'll check back. Gillian, that wraps up the first half of the show. It's time now for the halftime report, where Gillian is going to summarize the key takeaways from the lead story in 30 seconds before the second half of the show. Gillian, what you got?
Yeah, so this is one thing that I didn't mention, and it's actually from our eMarketer forecast that came out in March 2021. And it's talking about how much ad revenue LinkedIn gets per user. And this year, it'll get roughly $40.50 per user in the US. So that just kind of puts some context into some of those big, grandiose numbers that we were talking about.
Yep. That's all we've got time for the lead story. Time now for In Other News. But first, a quick word from our sponsor, VTEX. Retail's next competitive threat may come from a business model or channel that didn't even exist a few months ago. This modern dynamic requires companies to adapt quickly, pivoting business seemingly overnight, something traditional commerce platforms just can't support. There's a new enterprise commerce platform on the rise, one that's fast, flexible, and doesn't require 9 months and $1 million to get up and running. Go to vtex.com/emarketer to learn more. That's vtex.com. All right, folks, we are back today. In other news, are pretty much all events this year destined to be virtual? How do you make B2B events appealing? And how excited should we be about robotic process automation? Story 1. Apple just said that its Worldwide Developers Conference will take place June 7th to June 11th this year, and similar to last year, will be an online-only event. John Porter of The Verge writes that, quote, "It's not surprising that Apple has opted to make its global conference for developers online only, given that the impact of COVID-19 is still being felt around the world. Facebook's F8 Developer Conference will be virtual this year, and San Diego Comic-Con and the 2021 Anime Expo have also confirmed that their physical events will not take place. But some organizations are trying to make limited physical events happen, like Mobile World Congress in Barcelona." Close quote. Cannes Lions International Festival of Creativity in France will be going all virtual for the second year in a row. Gillian, a couple of examples I've just mentioned. Are pretty much all events, apart from one or two this year, destined to be virtual?
I think they're all destined to have a virtual component. We've talked a little bit about, what's going to happen? What are the precautions that we have to put in place to have a physical event? So in order for an event to be in person, event organizers have to tackle those issues. If those are issues that they do not want to tackle, then yeah, they'll be virtual. But I think an interesting headline that I saw last week is that CES actually announced that next year, so that's January 2022, obviously, a long way off, although not that far off when you think about it. They will be in person, but they will still have a virtual component. And a reason for that is when you think about all of these event organizers that have been doing virtual for 14, 15 months now, they've already built all this infrastructure. So they're not just going to abandon it. They're going to keep using it to engage audiences in a virtual way. But the return to events is certainly happening, whether or not I personally am ready for it or not.
Right.
Never mind everybody else.
I'm glad you brought up CES because it's a Consumer Electronics Show. Because I did want to talk about it. So Vegas, it's going to be in Vegas next year, as it normally is, 2022. 1,000 companies apparently already signed up to the show. It starts January 5th, including Amazon and Sony and others. They were all virtual. For this year's event, they will be offering a digital option, as we mentioned, companies likely would for next year, along with the in-person element. 2020's pre-COVID event saw over 170,000 people attend from 164 countries. And so I think two things here. One is the 2022. I think being just inside a new year with a new number is going to psychologically help people think, okay, it's
Reset.
a lot later. Yeah, exactly. Versus if it was in December, 29th of 2021, it's still like, oh, I don't know, 2021, it's a bit of a transitional year. And the second thing here is 164 countries. So that's a lot of places around the world. And there may be certain countries, Israel, the UAE, the UK, the US, who are doing well in terms of getting a lot of their population vaccinated. However, a lot aren't. And so March 13th article from The Economist was talking about the radically different rates of vaccination programs taking place across countries. They said, quote, precisely because countries are vaccinating at drastically different rates, COVID passports could come into their own for international travel. Even as America, Britain, Israel, and a few other countries sprint towards herd immunity, only 7% of EU citizens, this was halfway through March, 7% of EU citizens have had their first jab. In some poorer countries, vaccination is likely to continue into 2023 or 2024. Without a way to speed the vaccinated through airports, the world will remain locked down even if some individual countries do not. So conferences is one thing, but international folks is a completely separate issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to happen in phases. I think we're going to march one step forward as an industry into, on the road to normalcy, and we're going to see how that is. And if it went well, then we'll continue to move forward. And I definitely think that as this reopening happens for the world, for our local cities, New York City just announced last week, Mayor Bill de Blasio announced that New York City is open for business and people will flock to New York City this summer. I was nervous about that. I don't want people flocking to my city,
Walk briskly at best.
Crowds are still something that I'm a little bit weary about for sure. So, everybody's trying to figure out what reopening looks like, and the events industry is doing just that. They're trying to figure out what the safety measures are. Are there going to be certain country restrictions? Like you can only go to CES if you're from the US, and like what does that mean for, inequities in society in general? I think we're going to be grappling with some really big philosophical questions and, humanitarian questions too. And this is just a technology show at the end of the day,
Right. I do wonder about that last one. Will there be, okay, your company can come, but only employees who are based in X country, or maybe, people do have to have a vaccination card or passport. Maybe people do have to have a COVID test or something to that extent. Because with the Olympics, Japan's going ahead, putting the Olympics on. As of right now, at least that could change. And, a lot of countries competing in the Olympics, a lot of fans around the world would normally likely attend. However, about 80% of the tickets that are being sold have gone to Japanese locals.
Yeah.
And so hearing that, it's like, well, is that fair? But at the same time, it's like, well, that's what's needed to put the event on. And so will that change over time? I'm sure it will. But yeah, things are going to look very different for a really long time.
And I think the question isn't fair. Is it safe? I think the rubric has changed, and hopefully we'll get to a place, a few years in the future where it's fair and safe. So it's both of those things. But for now, there's these inequities are inevitable if attendees want to be safe and only a small portion of people are vaccinated.
Yeah, we're getting there. Story 2. How do you make B2B events appealing with a stronger punchline? Pinterest's Jim Habig wrote a piece in Adweek talking about how they approach things. He notes that you can't just take attention of your customers or attendees for granted. When they tried to promote their first ever Global Advertiser Summit, Pinterest, it didn't go quite as planned. He says he quickly recognized that simply showing up on social, LinkedIn, customer inboxes, and announcing that we were doing something was not going to cut it. So they took the most poignant sound bites from their sessions and chopped off the endings. Want the punchline? Well, you have to tune in. After cutting a series of cliffhanger trailers, they ended up being their most performant LinkedIn ads of all time. And thanks, he says, to a simple realization, marketers are people too. They want some intrigue. For crying out loud. Gillian, how to make B2B events more appealing. What are your thoughts here?
Well, I do want to respond to the headline in that I do think that B2B events are appealing, but I might be one of the few more appealing. No,
remotely appealing.
I mean, what Pinterest is doing in that scenario is essentially gating content. They're trying to dangle something in front of their audience that they want to tease, and they're trying to, get that I think intrigue was the word you used, that intrigue, that interest, that excitement, creating a little bit of anticipation there. And I think, if that worked, if those are some of the best performing LinkedIn ads for Pinterest, that's great. But the risk there is if you do that and then what the audience gets to see, after going through all those hoops, if that is lackluster, then that's going to be a really bad experience. So you have to be able to back it up. I think that's the biggest thing. And if your content isn't worthy of that, don't try, because it's only going to, backfire and blow up in your face, unfortunately.
Yep. Story 3. Robotic process automation. If you're not already asleep, then listen up, folks, because this might be one of the most important terms of the next few years. So, robotic process automation, or RPA, is where you tell a machine to execute a mundane, repetitive manual task. One mini example, if you're an Excel person, would be a macro. Creating a macro and having it repeat the same automated process again and again without having to click all those buttons. A slightly more advanced example would be if you have to go to the Department of Labor's website every month to grab the unemployment figure for your model. Or maybe a more relatable example would be if you could just forward your email receipts to an email address and then it submitted your expenses for you. Now we're talking. Well, that's the tip of the iceberg, because as Kevin Roos of the New York Times notes, with RPA, we're seeing automation that is designed not just to replace one task or two tasks, but is really designed to replace an entire human's workload. The RPA companies now are selling what they call digital workers. Think of a robot writing an entire company earnings report and more. Mr. Roos says, so instead of automating earnings reports, you can automate entry-level corporate journalism. Gillian, your thoughts on robotic process automation and automating different jobs in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll be very honest, I do not have a deep expertise in this beyond, Marcus, what you just shared and some of the articles you sent over. Do I think, that we could automate journalism, good journalism, the kind of reports that eMarketer and Insider Intelligence puts out? No. Do I think we should? No. Would I love someone to help me schedule the interviews that I do with sources, some of those administrative tasks, some of the things that I end up wasting my valuable time on because I have to do it, even though it doesn't actually, equate to solid quality work, but it's kind of the building blocks of what I need to do to get it done. That's the kind of stuff I think myself and all workers need help with. Like, Marcus, wouldn't you love to use some sort of tool to help you wrangle all the analysts to schedule instead of emailing us and then trying to track us down and then we don't answer and then we tell you no? Like, wouldn't you rather a robot do that?
I'd rather just you were all on one email and I could just send it to that email. And even though you got blasted with multiple emails,
we could all just reply.
You'd all just at least hear about it and get back to me.
I think we actually just solved the problem, like, by mistake on air. So
we did, but then you'd also get emails about everybody else's episode all the time. It would really benefit me greatly and no one else.
I just delete them if they weren't of interest to me.
Oh,
delete.
Don't tempt me, Gillian. I'll create one. Yeah,
not a bad idea.
There are definitely things which I think can help speed up the jobs we do. I mean, we were talking about voice and people using voice assistants in their day-to-day work, and there was a research firm which was suggesting that a quarter of knowledge workers will be using some kind of virtual assistant for 25% of their job in the next couple of years. And I was thinking, it would be great if I could just say, we're talking about LinkedIn, linkedin.com, and it just popped up as opposed to clicking on the thing in the browser, typing it in. Or if I want to send an email to someone, just saying open email, reading what I want to say and then saying send, and that being sent off. Or saying, calendar, can you find a time when me, Gillian, and Victoria are available on Friday? No, who wants a Friday meeting? On Monday at 11 between 11 and 2 for half an hour.
Sign me up for all of this. How much brain space do we spend on these things that need to get done, but we shouldn't be wasting our valuable time on them? Exactly. I'm down. I'm not threatened by robots. Bring them on.
We should be wasting our valuable time looking up in NSYNCs. It's going to be me.
That is not a waste of time. This is my last meeting of the day. I'm going to go play it. as soon as we get off this recording.
Me too, just in case anyone asks me about it in the future. That's all we've got time for this episode. Thank you so much to my guest, Gillian.
This was so fun. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining. Pleasure. And thank you so much to everyone listening. We'll see you guys, if you're not that upset with me and you want to hang out again, we'll see you hopefully for tomorrow for another episode of Behind the Numbers Daily, the marketing podcast made possible by VTEX.